All right, it looks like we're good. I'm going to go ahead and start day 5. We'll check on the README first, see quick recap of day 4. So day 3, I think day 4 was Auth middleware. So day 4. Yeah, so the client sent a request to a protected route. We had to decode their JWT, determine if it was authentic, modify req.user with the user's ID, and then send them on with that next command so that they could do whatever they need to do. If the JWT is not authentic, we reject the request. So we'll take a look at that right now again. I have Postman pulled up with a GET request to protected. And if we go to our users router, oops, we can take a look at that route. So, oh, I'm sorry, it's in our app.js actually. So we'll go back to app.js. So right here we see we're sending a GET request to /protected, but before it's allowed to actually respond with authorized, we send it to our middleware auth. And that middleware is located in authentication.js. Let's take a look at that. So here's where it has to get passed. We grab the token from the header, and that's stored in Postman right here. Bearer token and then token, and it'll automatically create that header right here for us. It's awesome. And this is emulating the front end, eventual front end request. So yeah, we copy that token and then we verify it, and if it's good, we get the decoded token, which includes our user ID. If it's bad, this will throw an error, which will be catched by the catch block, and next error will eventually hit the built-in express error handler. So let's see it both ways just to refresh our memories. Here, I'm hoping this is still good, this token. I set it, by default, they never expired, so I never set an expiration. So we should still actually be good, and we can see authorized. But if we change one letter of this token, an error, oh, I deleted it and then put back the E. Let me actually delete the E. All right, so we get this error. An error right here was thrown, and it was caught here. And then eventually this response is sent, JSON web token error. So that's perfect. Okay, so that's what we did on day 4. And now we're going to start day 5. All right, so we're actually done with user authentication, which is one of the most complex things I think we're going to do at all in this entire app. So if you made it this far, you're good. All right, so you'll notice we already created a user model, and I finally pre-pulled it up in our MongoDB Atlas, and this is our database, and our collection is users, and we can see all the users that we created during testing, just for our user authentication. But now we want another collection, and we want this collection to be called submissions, because the whole point of this app is that users are going to submit some CSS art images. So images made purely in CSS. And maybe there's an example, CSS art, CodePen. So I know CodePen already does this, or you can submit obviously your code, but I want to make a site that's specifically tailored to just art and rating art submissions. These are actually really cool. So you'll see the HTML here and the CSS, and there should be no JavaScript. Yep. So purely from CSS and HTML. That's really freaking good. So that's the point of the whole site. So I'm going to call the submissions submissions from the user. And so this is the objective we're working on. Create submission model and routes. So a submission should have the user ID of the user who's submitting, which we can get because now we have authorization. And that's going to be stored on that req.user we created in this step right here. And then I also want to store the CSS, probably in just string for now, before I think of something better to possibly do. And I'm also going to want the HTML. That'll be necessary as well, which we'll store as a string too. This is new, so this is exploratory for me as well. Like, this is a new concept that I thought would be fun. And then the title. So, for example, CSS Vintage Cassette Player was the name of this one right here. So those are the things initially I want to create as my model. But we're going to probably tweak it eventually. But let's get started creating that model. We'll open up the Explorer, and just to remind you, this is what our user model looked like. So it's going to be very similar, partly similar. So in our models folder, let's create a new file and call it submission.js. And the whole point of this model, the objective right now is to show what the model we want to look like. What do we want to be validated? So we have to bring in Mongoose, because that's the package to build out our models. And let me close this to give us some more space. So first we need a schema. So we can say submission schema equals mongoose.schema. And now the things we want. So we said we want the user ID. And here's where we specify the options. Like, is this required? What type is it? Is it a string or number? But here, this is actually pretty complicated. So the type you might think would be a string, right? Because it's the user ID. But the type we're after is actually this right here. It won't let me highlight it, but this object ID from Mongoose. So this isn't just a normal string. This is some weird Mongoose, or actually MongoDB specific data type. I think it's an object at its heart, but for the type, to tell Mongoose that that's what we want to use, we have to say mongoose dot, I might have to actually look this up, schema type dot, yeah, I'm gonna have to look this one up. So Mongoose ID type mongoose.schema type. I think here it is, mongoose.types.object ID. Nope. Mongoose.schema dot, there we maybe go, types dot, okay, nice. Oh, that's cool. So these built-in types are available too. I don't know if they give you something more than just saying the word, because usually we could just say like here, just string, and it would enforce that it's a type string. But I don't know if you use the built-in, which one do we want? Schema types or schema? Mongoose dot, I wonder if this will work, schema types. I think that's probably good too. We'll try that. Basically what we're really after is this object ID from the Mongoose object. So the user ID, and we want it to be required, right? So we'll put required. And also, I think it should be, you know what? It shouldn't be unique, because a user should be able to make a lot of different submissions, and they'll all have that same user ID. So we're good there. So Control Save on VS Code, and prettier will make it nice. And then what else do I want? I said I want CSS, right? And this will be easier because this is just type string. So a user is going to have a form and be able to just submit all the CSS by like copy and pasting it. But we do want this to be required. And what's the error there? Oh, no error. Okay. And we want it to be unique. Yeah, right? One submission, one CSS shouldn't be able to be submitted multiple times. I can't imagine a use case for that. We don't want them to spam the same submissions. So let's go ahead with unique true. And then HTML will be, I'm going to copy it because it'll be exactly the same, I believe. Well, what's the chance that somebody submits the exact same HTML? Because the CSS will obviously be unique, but what if they just have a very simple HTML? I think I'll take off unique for that. The chances are slim that they would, two submissions would have the same exact. Oh no, it's not slim because the same user might use the same pattern. So we definitely don't want unique there. So that's what I want a submission to look like. And maybe to give this a little clearer idea, here's what I'm telling Mongoose to enforce. User ID will be like blah, 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 something. And then CSS will be like div, it'll be CSS. Color, red, you know, this whole thing. And then HTML will be HTML. So this is what I want my object to look like. And this is the rules to get that to happen. So now that we have our schema, we can go ahead and say const submission equals mongoose.model. And then to define a model, we need to give it a name first. So we said we want it to be called submission. And the second argument is the schema. And we have submission schema. Now to make sure this is available, this model, to every other piece of our app that might need it, we export it. And I think that's probably good. Let's return to the README. I think we can maybe check off a box or two. So submission should have user ID, CSS, HTML. I'll say submission model. Yeah, we're good there. And so now we can start working on the routing. So we want a user to be able to submit a request to post a new submission. So we need a route for them to send that request. for example, in Postman, I want to create something that basically says submissions, just like that, slash submissions. So looking at our routes right now, we have users. So we're going to do something very similar. Say new file, submissions.js. And then the question becomes, how do we build a route? So Express has a built-in route generation. But first we have to bring in Express. And let me save README. It's bugging me, that circle. Okay, so, and I'll close the Explorer. I'll try to get used to this. So I keep this is way magnified, the code for streams. It's really way smaller when I'm not streaming, just because I hate YouTube videos when I can't see from my couch, because I like to just lie down and watch in my living room. So I make it all big, but so the Explorer is usually always open, but now I'm trying to keep it closed. And it says here it's Control-Shift-E to close it, but that's not working. So figure it out later. All right, so we want a router. We want specifically a submission router. So we'll do express.router. It's built in, and I only know this because I looked up the docs or a guide online. I'm not going to re-show you because I already did it once, took you through the Googling stuff. I think that'll be the strategy. Like on every new project, I'll Google it first to show you where I found it, kind of, and then after that, we're not going to repeat it. All right, submission router equals express.router. Let's just get a simple, well, we want to do a post request. That's our first task in our README, to make a new submission. And our path is just going to be /, because in app.js, we're going to say app.useThisRouter with /submissions. And if we put submissions here, again, it would really be /submissions/submissions, which we don't want. So we just want /. And the second argument for this method, this post method, is a middleware we want to be invoked. And we'll put req.res next. And then what do we want to happen right now? Just a message that says will post a submission. And then I want this router to be available to app.js when I plug it in. So I have to export it. Module.exports equals submission router. So now let me return to app.js. And I'm going to put it here. So it's going to look very similar to the user router. Because again, this is the goal for us to hit this route, this path. So I want to say app.use. So app.use, remember, it's like I don't care if I'm get, post, delete, whatever. I'm gonna activate. The path I want is /submissions. And here I can plug in my submission router. And since I already wrote the code and exported it, I could auto import it, which is really nice. And it even appears right where I put the other router. I'm not sure how it does that. It seems really smart. I don't know if that's a coincidence or actually coded in, but it's awesome. So let's test out this route. We send a post request to submissions and send a request, and we get an error. Cannot post to /submissions. So something's going on. Did I not? I didn't save the file right here. So we'll save, send it again, and we get will post a submission. And that's great, but I don't want anyone to be able to post a submission, right? I only want a logged in user. So I actually have to go back to my submissions router, and before they get to this point, this middleware, I want to make sure they're signed in. So I want to use my auth middleware and tab, and it'll auto import it. So that's nice. And then comma. Now a user who's logged in only will be able to hit this, this route. So let's see now when we did auth if they'll still be able to hit that route. So I'm going to click send on Postman, and they still get in. But here's the awesome part. Now we have a logged in user on our req.user. Or maybe we don't. What's going on here? Oh, huh. Wait, how did we? Let me redo that. Let me redo that. Okay, I think I didn't save in our first request. So let me resend the request, and it fails. Okay, and it says invalid token. I think I deleted that character E from our token. So let me put it back in and press send again, and we get authorized. And the best part about authorization is now we know who our user is because it's stored on req.user. And I can show you by console logging that out. Yep, so here's our user ID. Super useful. All right, so now we have to do the work of actually creating the new post. Shouldn't be bad though. So let's say, I'm sorry, I said post, I mean submission. So let's say submission, our model. I'm going to auto import that in because I need it. Dot create, and create will create a new submission from our Mongoose model and insert it into the database. But we have to give it what we want. We have to give it the fields that it requires, which were, we can look at again, but. So we have to give it a user ID, CSS, and HTML. So user ID is handled because that's req.user, right? And we console.log that below. But we also need now the CSS, which we'll just fake as, I don't know. Well, maybe I'll get a little sample CSS, I guess, from somewhere. So I'll copy this CSS and I'll put it in Postman. Now that's it's gonna be annoying for our sample. It's gonna be too much text. I'm gonna just simulate it. I think you guys get the point. This is gonna be CSS code in string form. Hopefully that makes sense. And this is JSON, so it needs quotes for its key as well. And then comma, and then we'll do HTML. And right now we'll just put HTML code. Yep, and I think that's all we need to do our submission.create. So we have to give it the object to create. So for our user ID, we can just give it user. I think we're good. And for CSS, that's going to be from req.body.css. And for the HTML, it's going to be similar, req.body.html. This is going to be an async. This is going to return a promise. So we want to wrap it in a try catch so we can use async await. So I'll go ahead and delete this. We don't need this anymore. And I'll use try catch and I'll have it auto generate with tab. I'm going to put this code into the try block. And for if there's an error, I just want to use our built-in error handler. So I'm going to say return next error, and that'll pass it off to the magic of Express and show us the error. And then, okay, so when this is successfully created and inserted into the database, it'll return a submission. And I want to say await before this. So I don't want it to just return a promise. I want it to return the meat of the promise. So go ahead and wait as long as you need, but get me the good stuff and store that in submission. And since I'm using the keyword await, this is just JavaScript rule that we have to put async here. And now I just want to respond.json with that submission so that we can see it here in our client if everything goes well. And hopefully everything goes well. So, and just as a refresher, the only way this is grabbing the req.user.id is because we still have this stored token in here. So it's going through authenticating and decoding that token. And then the other pieces it needs are just coming from req.body. So let's click send, hold our breath. And we got an error. User is not defined. So I must have in our model called this user. Oh no, I didn't, right? In the model, I'm pretty sure. Oh, okay, the error is coming from here. This isn't user, this is req.user. Because that's how we did it in our authentication, right here. We created that. So let's save and try again. I click send, and yeah, that's awesome. I get a submission, our first submission document. It has its own unique ID generated by MongoDB. It has our user ID successfully, the logged in user right now that made this request, and it has some simulated CS code and HTML code. So that's awesome. Let's try to make an error and see what happens. I'll delete the CSS property. See what happens. I get a net validation error, submission validation failed. CSS path CSS is required, perfect. I'll delete the HTML and same thing, path HTML is required. And we already see when we didn't submit the user correctly, how that failed. So we don't need to repeat that. And if we try to submit the same CSS code, because I'm pretty sure we made this unique, right? Hopefully this will fail. And yeah, duplicate key error collection. Duplicate CSS key. So that is awesome. I think we get a check. So we submitted to we submitted a post request to /submissions, and we posted a submission. And even in the the database, we can check it out. So here's our users collection. But we want to refresh this. And now we have a new collection called submissions. Click on that, and we see our submission document. And we even see that the user ID successfully got that type, that object ID type, from the code we wrote in our submission model, which I'll take you to. Right here, this code that we had to look up. So that all went really well. Usually doesn't go this well with live coding. We usually have more errors. I don't even think I think I have to add some more things. Oh no, okay. So our next objective is to do a GET request and fetch all of the submissions. That'll be really useful when we're doing our front end. So let's do that. So back to our submissions router. Yeah, this is going to be very similar. So I'm actually going to copy the code. So here, it's not going to be a post request. It's going to be a GET request. It's still going to be to the same path to /submissions. Do I want the user to be logged in or not? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm going to take out this middleware, but we can always plop it in easy. That's the beauty of making that modular, that middleware. We can plug it in anywhere. So now, instead of one submission, I want submissions, and I want to await submission.find. And this, if we don't give it an argument, will return all submissions. And now we can just respond.json all those submissions. And if there's an error, the same error handler express will be activated. So we only have one submission right now, but it should still work. So let's go ahead and test that in Postman. We want to change this post request to a GET request. And let me save this file. And let's send the request. So it worked. We got an array of submissions. And right now we just have one document, one submission document. But of course, if we add some more, we do a post request. Hopefully we're still logged in. Send, change the CSS so it's unique, send again, and now I do a GET request, and we can see the three submissions. And all have the same user ID, perfect. So we know what user submitted the submission. So we get a check. And we get a big check. So awesome. Let's give ourselves some more objectives. I don't know if specifically there's anything more I need to do on the back end. I think we might actually start up on the front end, which is super exciting. Yeah, I can't really think of anything right now that the back end needs more. So yeah, we want to create a React front end. So our first step is just going to be bootstrapping our React project with npx create React app. And then we want to use React Router to set up some front-end routes. And those those front end routes should be whoops, /home. In our front end React project, we want to /home. What else do we want? We want like a logged in. I don't actually know right now. I know, so do we need a /? Yeah, we'll need a /login, definitely. And we'll need a /register. Home /login /register. Those are our first three critical things, definitely. So yeah, let's get started. And I'm gonna delete this. Well, whatever. We'll tweak that later if we need to. Okay, I'm gonna keep this running, our nice server, but create a totally separate VS Code window in a separate project. So I'm gonna go to File, New Window. I'm gonna go to File, Open Folder. And instead of CSS Art Server, I want CSS Art Client. And this will be our React front-end client. Whoops, so I have to create it. So I'll go to New, Folder, CSS Art Client. I really like keeping these two separate. I know some people don't, and of course it's your personal preference. I love my front end and my back end being totally separate because it causes me less confusion. And then I even deploy them separately. It's just what I like doing right now. The front end on React, I'll deploy on Netlify, the back end on Heroku. Oh, and that's interesting. We could work on deployment before we do this, but we don't need to. Maybe deployment will be both of them at the same time. All right, so, oh, you know what? This part always screws me up. I have to create the new folder with npx create react app. So I'm gonna actually delete that folder that I created. Sorry about that. So desktop, and I want to delete this empty folder and I can't right now because this is open. So let me close this folder. Let me try again to delete it, and it let me delete it. So let's go to terminal, new terminal. And now I want to get to my desktop because that's where I want this folder to exist. And now I want to create that folder and the React bootstrapped project by saying CSS Art Client. I think that's good. So now we're completely in the front end world. I'm even going to close Postman. I don't think I need it for a little bit. I'll minimize it. I won't go too crazy. And I'll delete some of these tabs. Close out that. This takes a second. Okay, it won't let me name it. I guess it doesn't like the hyphen. Oh, name can no longer contain capital letters. Wow, that must be brand freaking new. That's bizarre. Okay, CSS art server. That bugs me. I like them like that symmetry of the names being the same. Yeah, that bugs me kind of. Whatever. Not the biggest deal in the world. Maybe I'll rename the back end and then watch the whole thing breaks. Maybe that isn't a new thing. Maybe I've always done. I haven't used a capital in a while. I don't know. I'm going to definitely copy over that README though. Yeah. But this is beautiful. We'll be able to run npm start and immediately see a working project. And it'll have like linters and all the fancy bells and whistles. It's just awesome. And when you use that keyword npx before create React app, it goes and fetches you the most new version of everything. As opposed to like npm install global create React app, then you're with an old version possibly. All right, it shouldn't be too much longer. But yeah, so the front end, we'll see it, like hello world React, and then we'll delete all that little bit of code in their app.js they gave us. And then we'll put in, we'll start working on our routes. Because eventually we want to say /home and see a home component being rendered, /login, a login form being rendered, /register and a register form component being rendered that then we can test out our backend. So you know what? I'm actually gonna just I don't know if this is gonna be another 5 minutes, so I'm gonna call the stream there. But yeah, this is exciting. We'll start up fresh on our front end next time. Thanks for watching. Check you later.